evening, everyone, and thank you for coming in. By the way, I'm very happy that you all are having such a good time. I'm sorry I have to take away from that for a few minutes, but I think you're really going to enjoy the program tonight. So let me begin by saying my name's Kelly O'Keefe. I'm president of the Florida Supreme Court Historical Society, and I am very happy to have you all here tonight. Thank you all for coming. We've got a wonderful group of jurists, lawyers, family, and friends, and I think it's the biggest turnout that we've had. If not, it's close, so we're almost there. We really appreciate your support of the Society. We got a really full program, and I'm going to be short about this. I'm going to go ahead and invite our Master of Ceremonies up, and I've heard that Judge Scales is really not a man that needs an introduction, is what I've heard, but I'm going to give just a short one, and people agree, no introduction, but I'm just going to give a short one while he is sitting right here. And Judge Scales serves on the 3rd District Court of Appeal, for those of you who do not know, and he's been serving since 2013. He was a litigator, and I think I say this, he had a passion for service for the profession, as well as his community. He served on the Florida Bar Board of Governors for 4 terms, and he also served on the federal and state judicial nominating commissions. Now, he was also a Key West City Commissioner, and I think that must have been a very interesting job, so I'm hoping to hear some stories about that later. But Judge Scales, we welcome you to Tallahassee, and we welcome you to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Can we please begin with a moment of silence for the New England Patriots? We have a terrific evening planned, but we got to do something a little bit different tonight because of time constraints. There are so many justices and former justices and judges and dignitaries and presidents and president-elects and president emeriti and pontiffs and poobahs here that it would take us too long to do the typical introductions. So to be more efficient with our time tonight, what we're going to do is dispense with the VIP introductions and just have the very few folks here with us tonight who are irrelevant and insignificant stand up and introduce themselves. Ray Aberdeen, why don't we start with you? I'm just kidding, Ray. Just kidding. Speaking of Ray Aberdeen, and I don't know why Kelly didn't mention this, everybody, and I know we're kind of tight in here, we're going to have to squeeze in a little at our tables to make room for the 9,000 lawyers from New Jersey who are outside that Ray Aberdeen has invited to join us tonight. I kid Ray a lot because he's a dear friend of mine, and there's a question as to whether he's in the country illegally, but he has taught me a great deal about Miami, and when I got appointed, I had to rent a place in Miami. True story, absolute true story. Ray and I were driving around in Miami one day looking for stuff to name after Jack Harkness, and I was driving, and I used my turn signal in order to change lanes, and Ray went, he was furious. He was upset. He went irate. He said, "Don't ever do that. In Miami, the turn signal is a sign of surrender." And so, in any event, I am kidding about the VIP introductions, because if I did not do them, then there would be yet one more JQC complaint against me. I will begin by introducing these folks, and if you could please hold your applause until we get through them all. Virtually all of the Florida Supreme Court is here, and we'll start with Justice George Labarga. Our Chief Justice is here. Justice Pariente is here. Justice Kennedy is here. Justice Perry is here. Justice Polston is here. And Justice Quince is here with us. We are also graced with several former members of the Florida Supreme Court. I believe Justice Anstead is here. Justice Harding, from whom we'll be hearing in a few minutes, is here. Justice Wells is here. Justice Grimes is here. And Justice Hatchett is here. From FSU, I'm sorry, did somebody say something else? Oh, Justice McDonald is here. Also, we're joined here tonight by the Dean of the FSU Law School. Dean Widener is here. We are also joined here tonight by the Executive Director of the Florida Bar Foundation, the recipient of the Tobias Simon Award, Bruce Blackwell, is here. Where is Bruce? Where is Bruce? Bruce, I understand, this is probably not appropriate, but did they lift that 500-foot restriction that you couldn't be within 500 feet? Okay, good. So that, those restraining orders are a bitch, Bruce, really are, but I'm glad to have you here. Gotta love him. I mentioned him earlier, the president of the Florida Bar, Ray Abedin, is here. The president-elect of the Florida Bar, Bill Schifino, is here. Michael Heiger is here. He is the president-elect designate. And one other man is here tonight. He is the executive director of the Florida Bar and has been for 114 years. Jack Harkness is here tonight. Jack does not know this yet, but earlier today, the FSU Board of Trustees named this building after Jack Harkness. So, congratulations. All right. What we're going to do now, because it's appropriate, is we're going to have our meal blessed, and also to say a few words about former Justice Leander Shaw is Justice Major Harding.
Thank you, Judge. When I accepted the opportunity to do this, I did not know who the presiding official would be for this evening. But nonetheless, I am honored and privileged to share with you a few memories of our dear friend Justice Leander Shaw. His life in the law and mine began on the very same day in 1960. We were sworn into the Florida Bar on the same day, in June of 1960. In 1991, when my wife Jane was packing to move us here to Tallahassee, she found a photo of that group that was sworn in on that day, and she was looking to find me, and there I am right there, and next to me was standing Leander Shaw. What a remarkable, wonderful occasion that was to find him. And we were standing on the steps together, and that picture now hanging in the lawyer's lounge at the Supreme Court and in my office is a constant reminder of the warm friendship Lee and I shared over the years. Looking at that picture brought back wonderful memories to my mind of Lee and the other black members of the bar who took the exam when I did. at the DuPont Plaza in Miami, and they could not stay there in the DuPont Plaza, nor could they even eat there because they were black. As Judge Hatchett reflects in his article in the Historical Society magazine, which I would encourage you to read, he said, they were the last of the early lawyers who lived through the prejudice and discrimination of on a widespread basis. And after passing the bar, Lee went to Jacksonville and entered private practice, and he later practiced there with the public defender and also the state attorney. I became a judge in 1968 there in Jacksonville, and Lee appeared before me from time to time as a lawyer, and of course he always won. One case that is particularly memorable was he was representing a grandfather who was seeking custody of his grandchild, the mother had died, and after hearing all of the evidence, I thought Lee's client should have custody of the child, and so announced. And the grandmother pulled a gun out of her pocketbook. And after a little bit of confusion, I learned not only how good a lawyer Lee was, but how fast he could run. In 1974, Governor Askew appointed him to the Florida Industrial Relations Commission. In 1979, Governor Graham appointed him to the First District Court of Appeal, and later in 1983 to the Supreme Court. And he was the first African-American Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Florida, and he was the Chief Justice when I came on the court in 1991. I encourage you to read the articles that are in the Historical Society magazine and recently also in the Florida Bar News. I would encourage you to read those, but this evening I would like, in the few minutes that I have, to share some of the memories of those who served on the court with him. And working with Lee on the court was truly a privilege, and we all remember the constant and consistent collegiality that he displayed on a daily basis. And there never was any hostility exhibited by him, even if he disagreed with you on the outcome of a case or even an issue. I remember one case in which, after indicating in conference how he thought a case should be decided, I indicated that I disagreed with him. After the conference, a majority opinion was circulated concurring with Lee's opinion. I wrote a dissent, and later on, Lee came into my office with my dissent in his hand. He raised his arm and he threw my dissent down on my desk, and he said, "Dadgummit, Major, I have to go with you on this." We both laughed, and his demeanor and his sense of humor were always effective in relieving any tension and would bring a smile. Interestingly, we also remember that Lee always carried in his pocket a copy of the United States Constitution. Justice Fred Lewis recalled to me Lee's great concern for the public perception of the court, and he recalled Lee's efforts in both public and private ways to ensure a proper image of the court and the judiciary to the public. And we all learned from the importance of this effort and admired his sense of propriety and were consciously following his efforts to protect the image of the court. Justice Periente recalled the saying that we all heard from Justice Lee: when you see a turtle on a fence post, you know it didn't get there by itself. Now, Lee Shaw used that phrase to express his acknowledgement that he had lots of help in achieving the success that he had achieved. And he also used this phrase to remind us that we should be acknowledging and thankful for the help that we have received along our journey to success. Interestingly, his recognition of this help was reflected not only in his saying, but also in his living. And one example was when Lee saw a story on the evening news where a woman had been robbed and the money she had saved to have dentures installed was stolen. He became concerned and asked his daughter to find out who the woman was and who the dentist was, and behind the scenes, he arranged to pay for the woman's dentures. Another similar story relates in the hurricane of Katrina, the havoc that was being relayed to him about the lives of young children who were going hungry and who were in need of aid. And he established his own public firm to deal with that, and funded the effort to help with those children. And of course, with the dentures, and in true Lee Shaw form, he took no public credit for helping, but put the turtle on the top of the fence. Justice Quince laughed and said, "Don't forget his doodling." Well, Lee was a persistent doodler. Go on and check that out as a synonym on Word, but we won't deal with that right now. While he sat next to me on the court and in conference, I got to see some of his doodles firsthand. And even though they may have been questions about whether they got to be art, I had some of them framed. And I will say that the discussion about hanging them in the rotunda of the court died quickly. Justice Wells recalled Lee's calm demeanor, his collegiality, and his sense of humor, and he recalled that Lee wore a hearing aid, and he used to laugh and say that he could cut off the hearing aid and did not have to listen to any argument he did not agree with, either in court or in conference. Well, while I was Chief Justice, Lee was a senior member of the court, and he sat next to me in court and also in conference. And because of his life experiences, his seniority on the court, and because he gave such wise counsel, I often would go to him for counsel in my leadership role as Chief Justice. My life and the lives of all of us who served on the court with Leander Shaw have been enriched by his friendship and by the opportunity to serve together with him. And my friends, the lives of the people of the state of Florida have been enriched and well served by Leander Shaw, because he never lost sight of the past and never gave up hope for the future. Thank you. I would ask now that you bow with me in prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the event that draws us together tonight, and for those who have served honorably on the Supreme Court of Florida in the past, and for those who now serve. And we thank you for our form of government, and for all who have served and now serve in each branch of that government, and have ensured our liberties and freedom since its beginning. Grant to all who now serve in public good, continued freedom, wisdom, guidance, and courage to protect that freedom. We give you thanks for the gift of Leander Shaw, whose memory we have honored tonight, and we thank you for the example of courage and grace he set for us as he fought and claimed victory over prejudice and discrimination. And we ask your blessing on all gathered here. Thank you for the opportunity to hear our speaker tonight, for the food we eat, the fellowship we share around these tables, and we ask this prayer in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Justice Harding. The meal will be served now. Please enjoy your meal. But this just in, America's produce growers have just named tonight's salad after Jack Harkness. So enjoy eating Jack. Many of you may have been wondering how I was selected to replace the perennial MC, Hank Cox, as he recovers from his gender reassignment surgery. And the truth is, Chief Justice Labarga called Kelly and said, since the Supreme Court justices will be there, you should have Ed Scales come. That way we can put a face with our reversals. So, and seriously, I was able to actually get a hold of an email string between Kelly and her first choice to replace Hank, former President Bill Clinton. I will read to you that email string. Kelly writes, Dear President Clinton, I know it's short notice, but is there any chance you can MC our Florida Supreme Court Historical Society dinner on Thursday? President Clinton responds, You know, Kelly, I'd love to, but the problem is, these days I'm bouncing between Iowa and New Hampshire trying to get Hillary elected, and I doubt I'll have time to come to Florida that early. Kelly's response, Yeah, but it's on a college campus. The president responds, Dang, Kelly, talk about burying the lead. No, I really can't make it, but thanks so much for your offer. Hey, by the way, what are you wearing? So that's actually how I became the fill-in tonight for Hank. While we're talking about politics, this just in, Donald Trump has named his hair after Jack Harkness. So that's, A lot of people have done a lot of work to put on this terrific event. And let me tell you a little bit about this terrific event. It started out 10 years ago with just one person, and that was Zack introducing himself to speak. And over the last 10 years it has grown, and tonight Zack will be introducing a legal legend. But the event has grown. It is up to 500 people, and thank you so much for coming. To provide an update on the Historical Society, please join me in welcoming its terrific president, Kelly O'Keefe.
So how did you get a hold of my emails? Well, it's been a real honor leading the society this year. I've got to thank a number of people before I go into the update. First of all, I want to thank the justices, both the justices past and present. Their cooperation has been tremendous. With the chief and the other justices, the society is mutually identifying projects that preserve the history of the court, that celebrate and record the court's present, and educate the public about the importance of the court's work to Florida's future. So I am being a little bit serious here, so just bear with me. We'll get back to Ed and the funny later. I also have to thank Jack Harkness, and we all know a lot about Jack thanks to Ed tonight. But you know, he has been a staunch supporter of the society, and we wouldn't be as successful without him, without the Board of Governors, without the Leadership Academy, without the Florida Bar Foundation, and I don't know if I'm leaving any other groups here that are here supporting the society tonight, and we thank you all for coming. I also want to thank Bruce, who has been a longtime member, past president of the Historical Society, and again, congratulate him on the honor bestowed on him today, the Tobias Simon Award. I think we have some other pro bono recipients here, award recipients here tonight too. And I think we need to give them, that group of people, the highest praise. And we really thank you for all that you do for the legal profession. And so I do have to thank all of those that are responsible for the dinner tonight too, all of our speakers, and also our executive director, Mark Miller. He's been great. He's been with us for the last few years and has helped us to make the dinner a success, the biggest dinner that we've had. And I also have to thank all of our trustees, many of whom are here today. They are the core of the society, and they are the ones that are doing the work to make and preserve, or to make the history and to preserve the court's history as well. With all of these people's support, the society is transitioning to the future while continuing past traditions and creating new ones. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how the society is transitioning. You want to know what some of the things that are going on. And for starters, it's transitioning to a more diverse group as a result of our outreach to young lawyers and law students. Our outreach is occurring in a number of ways, and one of those ways I want to tell you about tonight. It's a great project that we're working on. We're sparking the interest of law students by having them archive papers. Doesn't that sound thrilling? And I'm sure you're asking, so archiving papers, law students, how did we make that work? How did we get them to get interested? Well, we offered to give them a grant, and we offered to give an FSU law student organization a grant in order to assist us with the archiving work that we have to do. And what I wanted to do tonight is introduce you to a few of the people associated with that project. And FSU's law school has been instrumental in doing this, and we also have a law student here that's been helping us and got this program underway. That's Melanie Kalmanson, and she's here somewhere tonight. I'm not sure. There she is over there. She's going to be spending a lot of time at the Supreme Court because she's going to be working with Justice Pariente full-time very shortly. And today at our meeting, I asked Justice Pariente if we could just keep a little bit of her time to devote to the Supreme Court Historical Society, and I'm not sure what she said, but we're going to try. So with the help of these, with the help of these people in the law school, we sent out the applications. We received applications from a number of very worthy law student organizations, and we selected the Women's Law Symposium as the recipient of our first grant, and there are soon to be others as a result of our meeting today. And Lolia Fernandez is here representing the Women's Law Symposium tonight. She's over there too. So thank you, Lolia. Get ready to archive. As we continue to identify and invest in new opportunities to increase the diversity of our membership, the Society is also reinvigorating past traditions, like the passing of the gavel ceremony, and the portraits, and commissioning the future portraits, and of course the dinner. And we're very excited to have David Boies speaking here tonight, and I hope that you all are as excited as we are to have him. So, thank you. Yes, let's give a round of applause for David. So the Society is also addressing transitions that are going to occur on the court in the next 2 years, or 4 years. We've got a number of justices that are retiring, 4 of them. And we, the Society, are preparing to preserve the contributions each of those justices has made to the court and to the history of Florida through several related projects, which I'm just going to cover quickly to let you know what we'll be doing and what you can be on the lookout for. First, the Society is coordinating retirement ceremonies for each of the justices in his or her hometown, and the first is going to be Justice Perry's ceremony. Second, the Society is poised to prepare oral histories for each of the outgoing justices, and we're also working with the retiring justices to preserve their papers. It's the Society's trustees and members that are making all of these great programs possible, and we also have Sylvia Walbolt and the Long Range Planning Committee that are developing a roadmap for keeping these meaningful programs and traditions going and thriving for years to come. So while we're preparing, and I got one more transition to cover, and then you guys are going to watch a video with me. While we're preparing for future transitions on the court, the Society is also recounting a period of significant transition in the court's past with the third volume of its book. And at next year's dinner, you will be able to order the third volume of the court's history. The upcoming book is scheduled for publication, and we're looking for all of you to order that book and to get the word out about it. It covers the tumultuous years of 1972 to 87, and it's received rave reviews from our trustees who have reviewed it. What I want to do now is invite you to watch a brief video in which Neil Skene, the author, takes us back to that moment in time.
I'm Neil Skene. Before 1975, there had been just one black judge in all of Florida's history, and he had been removed from office in 1889 by the segregationist governor for giving a marriage license to an interracial couple. 90 years later, on the morning of September 2nd, 1975, in this courtroom, Joseph Woodrow Hatchett became the first black judge in Florida in the 20th century. Sitting in this now 66-year-old courtroom, I want to read some excerpts from my forthcoming book on the most tumultuous years in this court's history, 1972 to 1987. For decades, the court had thwarted efforts to end segregation and discrimination. As he looked out over the crowd that morning from the chair next to the one Hatchett would occupy, Justice Arthur J. England, Jr., who 9 months earlier had become the court's first Jewish justice, wondered if a black person had ever felt welcome in this courtroom before. Hatchett's investiture marked much more than a racial transformation, though. The Supreme Court by then was beginning to embrace the expansion of rights for women and minorities and gays. Government was open to public view. The court itself was experiencing a renaissance after a dark age of scandal. Governor Askew and others were succeeding in their years-long crusade to create a legal system as removed as possible from political pressures, with judges chosen for ability and integrity rather than political connections. The newcomers of the Askew era, Ben F. Overton, Arthur England, Alan C. Sundberg, and Joe Hatchett, became the four horsemen of a judicial reformation. Only one of them remained on the court longer than 8 years, and they often disagreed with each other on cases or policy, but they shared a powerful commitment to personal and judicial integrity. This book, the third volume in a series that began with the earliest court of territorial Florida, describes a judicial institution evolving in a time of deep political and social change, the 1970s and 1980s. Jack Neal was just another defendant in just another shooting in Miami until his lawyer raised the objection that made his case a national landmark. Blacks were being systematically excluded from the jury. It was a highly sensitive issue in Miami in January 1982 when Neal was brought to trial. A series of verdicts had produced outrage among blacks in Miami because of the all-white makeup of juries. In May 1980, an all-white jury in Tampa had acquitted 4 Dade County police officers in the beating death of Arthur McDuffie, a black businessman. Riots followed. Another all-white jury had acquitted a Hispanic police officer in the shooting death of Neville Johnson Jr., a 20-year-old black male. Again, there was racial violence. On the other hand, the black superintendent of Dade County Schools, Johnny L. Jones, had been convicted by an all-white jury over misuse of school funds in what was known as the Gold Plumbing case. Neil, who was black, had been charged with second-degree murder and unlawful possession of a firearm after the shooting of a black Haitian immigrant. Neil's mother worked at Palm Springs General Hospital, where Paul A. Lewis was outside counsel. The hospital administrator called Lewis on her behalf to get his help. Lewis took Neil's case and focused on self-defense, which put a premium on having a black juror who would be sensitive to the dynamics of two different black communities, as well as the pressure felt by an eyewitness who was an illegal alien summoned to testify for the government. On the day of trial, only 4 out of a panel of 35 prospective jurors were black. 3 of them were among the first group of 17 prospects brought forward for the questioning process known as voir dire. They gave the same general answers as white prospects about their lack of criminal records and ability to decide impartially, but all 3 blacks were dismissed. In court the next day, Lewis challenged the prosecutor's actions. "Is this Whitey's law?" he said to Circuit Judge Morton Perry. "This man is entitled to be tried by a jury of his peers." None of the justices, McDonald says, thought about how far out in front of the country Florida was going to be by ruling in Neil's favor. It really was unheard of for the Florida Supreme Court to step out ahead of the U.S. Supreme Court in expanding constitutional rights. "The right to a peremptory challenge is not of constitutional dimension," McDonald wrote. "It was not intended that such challenges be used to encroach upon the constitutional guarantee of an impartial jury." It would be 2 more years before the U.S. Supreme Court followed the Florida Supreme Court's example. In the 500 pages of this book, produced with a grant from the Florida Supreme Court Historical Society, I hope you find new insights about the court and enjoy stories you may never have heard before. From the courtroom of the Florida Supreme Court, I'm Neil Skene. Thanks for listening.
So we're really looking forward to sharing with you these insights and stories, and we thank you all for being a part of the court's history tonight. What I want to do now is call up to the stage Mitchell Berger to introduce Chief Justice Labarga. Mitchell is my partner at Berger-Singerman, and it's fitting that I'm introducing him now because he's actually the one, when I first joined Berger-Singerman, that sent me to the first meeting that I attended of the society, and I've been here ever since. So Mitchell, thank you for that. And Justice Wells is here too, and Justice Wells introduced me to bar service, so I just want to thank him for that. Very important parts of my life, and they've emphasized the important bar service to me, and they've emphasized the importance of an independent judiciary. So with that, I'll bring up Mitchell. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Good evening, and what an honor to be introducing Chief Justice Jorge Labarga to the Florida Supreme Court Historical Society this evening. It's fair to say this Chief Justice embodies the great state of Florida. Fleeing tyranny from Castro's Cuba, the chief started his life in America in the sugar fields of Pahokee. Quickly realizing that the surf on the beaches in Palm Beach were better than the sugar fields of Pahokee, he adopted quickly surfboard in tow. A career in law followed, 2 degrees from the University of Florida, where a young Jorge Labarga met his wife, Zuma, also a Gator. Dedicated to the rule of law and the profession, Jorge Labarga served as a prosecutor, a public defender, a trial court judge, one very long tenure on the 4th District Court of Appeals of one day, founded a law firm, and now serves as our 84th Chief Justice and our first Chief Justice of Cuban descent. He has received judicial appointments from both Democratic and Republican governors. The Chief is equally dedicated to his family and his community. He raised his daughters Stephanie and Caroline in Wellington, and he still commutes to Wellington by Prius every month. That's because we have such great flight service into town. He has every intention of permanently returning to this community of Wellington, his wife and his family in Wellington when he retires. But before going back to Wellington, Chief Justice Labarga has a big agenda he has enlisted us all in. He wants the judiciary to look like Florida. As he said in the passing of the gavel ceremony, while it can be said that we still have a ways to go, we have certainly come a long way since those dark days. It is absolutely imperative that we continue to strive to be a country and a state of inclusion, not exclusion. As one looks at the present composition of the United States Supreme Court and the present composition of the Florida Supreme Court, it can readily be seen that both institutions look like the face of America. It is also imperative that every effort is made to ensure that the court's members appear at every level of the judicial system. Chief Justice Labarga is examining the lack of access to our courts and what we in this room can do about it. Currently in Florida, only 20% of indigent people are able to receive legal counsel, and roughly 60% of our middle class has no access to the courts. That is not an alternative for a constitutional republic. Courts have to continue to peacefully and justly adjudicate the disputes of all of Florida's citizens. All of our citizens must be able to get access to the courts, not just the wealthy or the accused. We in the bar have the principal responsibility of following our leader, the Chief Justice, in making access to the courts the living embodiment of our profession. Having briefly described this man, his career, and his goals, I now have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting you the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Florida.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take a chance here because I'm reminded over and over again by Ed Scales that I should not allow my introduction to include my tenure at the Public Defenders in the State Attorney's Office because, as Ed reminds me, I put more people in prison as a public defender than I ever did as a prosecutor. But I do want to thank you so much for inviting me here. I've been on the court now 7 years, and I've been to this event each year, and this is one of the most enjoyable events of the year. And look how much we've grown. I remember it being a small room, and now it's like practically packed. They must have known that Ed Scales and Jack was going to be here tonight. In fact, the ceremony is being, pretty much named after Jack. As you may recall, in fact, speaking of Jack, my understanding is that Justice Poston and Justice Kennedy are going to pretty much celebrate their next descent in Jack's name. I'm going to get serious about you in a second, Jack, so I just had to take that one. And as you may recall, I did have an opportunity to address this wonderful event last year, and I was informed, I was actually deceived by Hancock's that I had only 3 minutes to speak last year, only to learn later from Sylvia that I actually had 10 minutes. Given that act of deceit, I am hereby reserving the 7 minutes that I was cheated in case I have to rebut, my good friend Ed Scales, and so far I'm doing pretty good, so I may not have to use it, but we got a ways to go. And before I begin my brief comments, I do want to welcome my friend David Boies back in our state, even though it is a presidential election year. Of course, all of us remember David Boies from the small little dust-up we had back in the year 2000. Welcome, Mr. Boies. I'm sure you will find the month of January in Florida more inviting than, say, November. The annual dinner of the Florida Supreme Court Historical Society is not only one of my favorite events of the year, but a wonderful way to close out today's events. This afternoon, my colleagues on the court and I were privileged to take part in one of the most inspiring events on the court's calendar, the annual Pro Bono Service Award ceremony. Today's Pro Bono Award ceremony was my 7th, and like the first 6, it left me amazed and deeply moved. The commitment, creativity, and epic energy of so many individuals and groups in the legal profession is truly astounding. Not only do they change lives, they also strengthen our society, our economy, and our democratic form of government. Yet, the need they address remains bigger than their commitment, their creativity, and their energy. As I have said before, this justice gap that we are experiencing is a societal problem that requires a societal solution. This is exactly why the Florida Commission on Access to Civil Justice was created in 2014 and has been hard at work to address this particular societal problem, and I'm very proud of the work it has done so far. Another wonderful event and very special event took place this morning here in Tallahassee. An event proudly attended by most of you that I've seen in here, in addition to many, many others. An event to honor the most humble and unassuming person I have ever met. An event to honor his 36th year as executive director of the Florida Bar. That means 36 presidents of the bar. That's a lot of therapy, Jack. In fact, the Psychology Association of the United States is going to basically dedicate their building after you. An event to honor his devotion to our judicial system and ensuring that the rule of law will always be our democracy's guiding light took place today. I do not dare to think about where our beloved profession will be today without his patient, meticulous, and thoughtful guiding hand. I speak, of course, of none other than Jack Harkness. We're going to make him cry tonight. Now, the renaming ceremony of the entire Florida Bar Complex to the John F. Harkness Jr. Florida Bar Complex, also known as the Jack, it's got to be one of the most touching and most deserving ceremonies I've ever attended. And I thank him for his service. And I hope you stick around a few more years, Jack. And you know, he is a Gator, you know that. I do want to take just a few minutes to bring you up to date on our beautiful Supreme Court building. As you have seen just by driving by it, the building has been under repair for quite some time. And trust me, Justice Pariente, myself, and the other justices have been hearing the hammers on the copper tin roof up there. And there's this one guy with one of those little machines who is very gifted. Man deserves an Oscar. But we finally got our roof fixed. And the roof that was on there was the original roof in the building when it was constructed back in the late 40s. And it was leaking everywhere. Well, most everywhere, some of those buckets we put there. But we got the roof. And we can now put the buckets away, hopefully. The outer walls have been completely refurbished. They were sandblasted and will soon be painted. And the beautiful dome has been refurbished, and its exterior will be illuminated, which will make it a beautiful sight when you drive by it at night. Thanks to the endless efforts of President Kelly O'Keefe and Mark Miller, we are working on redecorating the interior of the building as well. For instance, the interior of the dome in the inside of it is now also lit up. The back of the building, facing that beautiful Secretary of State building, now has a well-designed fence, and protection devices will soon be installed to protect us from people being able to get into the garage and things like that. I'm interested to see those things. Are going to pop up and down as we go in, as it pops up right in the middle of my Prius. Then I'm really going to have to fly home. We installed new hardwood flooring in the chief's office's suite, and the old red rug that had been there since the Civil War has been removed. And interesting, when we removed in the waiting area of the Chief Justice's suite, if you can picture that in your mind, if you've been up there, there was a red carpet. When we removed the carpet to install the wood that was supposed to go there, we discovered that the carpet had covered up this beautiful green terrazzo flooring that pretty much is the rest of the floor is that terrazzo flooring from the original building. So I remember I was in Key West with my wife this summer while that construction was going on, and I get a call from the marshal. And he tells me, he says, we got a problem. I mean, we just took the rug off, and under it, only in that waiting area, the rest of it was just a slab, but under that area, there's this beautiful terrazzo. And I said, well, how is it fixable? Is it okay? Is it scratched up? Whatever. He said, no, it looks like we can probably work on it. And so I said, well, I think this historical society will probably execute me if we put wood over that. So why don't you do this? Just see if you guys can fix it up. Well, apparently, there aren't that many people who know how to work on that type of flooring anymore. So our folks, the people who maintain our building, they learned how to do it, and they fixed it up. And there was this one area, the flooring was about 1 inch lower there than in the other part, and somebody had crudely created this little concrete ramp so the rug over it would flow better. So they had to scrape pretty much that ramp off and put the terrazzo flooring on it. And they got so good at it. I mean, they practiced and practiced with it, and when you walk in there, you can't tell the difference. They shined it up, and it looks the same, and it's just beautiful. It's just out there beautiful. So we are working on the interior, and Kelly and Mark and I are working on the front end of the courtroom when you walk in, where, if you've seen it today when you attended, we do have new features there, and we're working on that as well. So we're trying to make it as beautiful as it was when it was created. And it is a beautiful building. And I encourage all of you, if you have the time, to drop by, not by my office, but drop by the building. I can just see you going to my JA. Well, he told us to come. One more thing, and I'll sit down, and I'm still reserving the 7 minutes because he's coming back up here. One of the Historical Society's goals has been to expand our current membership. We'll have to get a bigger room next time. I think we got one in Gainesville. I think Justice Poston is signaling that he's dissenting to that. With thousands of legal professionals using social media today, like Twitter and Instagram, the Society believes a social media presence will attract additional members throughout the entire state. And I think that's important. To that end, President Kelly O'Keefe and board member Stephanie Varela, who's here somewhere, have created a social media account for Twitter and Instagram to promote the Society's events and promote future functions. So people from around the state, young professionals who are into this computer thing, can actually find out what we're doing. But I am indeed very grateful to the dedication of the Florida Supreme Court's Historical Society, to the preservation of our beautiful building, and the wonderful history that goes along with it. I thank you. Thank you for having me. Ed, be cool. I got 7 minutes.
One of the greatest human beings to ever walk the face of the earth, ladies and gentlemen. Without question. Tonight, Chief Justice Labarga took me aside and he says, "Ed, how well do you know David Boies?" And I said, I don't know him at all. He says, "You better get to know him." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because he does retention recounts too." And some of you will get that joke tomorrow, and then you'll laugh at an inappropriate time, I think. So, this just in. The Florida legislature has just named the Constitutional Revision Commission after Jack Harkness, which is very appropriate because it is convened once every 20 years, and Jack's been deeply involved with 7 commissions. So we're going to go off program just a little bit here. Please join me in recognizing the Vice President of the Historical Society, Buddy Schultz, from the Jacksonville office of Holland and Knight, to make a special acknowledgement.
Good evening. I was asked on behalf of the Historical Society to recognize our partner at Holland & Knight, Justice Steve Grimes, who has most recently retired from the active practice of law after 61 years, approximately a month ago. I was then asked to raise my right hand and solemnly swear that I would be brief because of the extensive program that we have this evening. I said it'd be tough, but that I will. It's hard to be brief, though, folks, in describing such a distinguished career and in expressing our appreciation for it, Justice. It's clear that from the beginning, Justice Grimes and his wife, Faye, now of 64 years, determined that public service is not just a way of life, but it is a way to live life fully. And they have. Even before he finished law school, Justice Grimes, immediately after the breakout of the Korean War, left school to enter the service of our country. He graduated in 1954 with honors after having been the chief editor of the Law Review. He had a lot of opportunities to begin his employment in the profession. He chose to go to Bartow and practice with Holland, Beavis, McRae, and Smith, the predecessor to our firm, Holland & Knight. I suggest that he went there because they were good lawyers. At the same time, he and Faye went back to Bartow because they were good citizens, dedicated to public service. We know Spessard Holland was the 28th governor of the state of Florida. He served as our senator from 1946 to 1971. Bill McRae was President Kennedy's first appointment to the federal judgeship after his inauguration. And we all know Chesterfield Smith, President of the American Bar Association, President of the Florida Bar, and probably involved in everything else that has affected our lives over the last 50, 60, 70 years as lawyers and citizens of the of the state of Florida. They even had a policy published in the office manual at Senator Holland's firm that everyone, including the receptionist, all members of the staff, were entitled to take one afternoon off every week to go into the community and provide public service. Justice Grimes did it immediately. He became very involved in the Rotary Club and rose to be its president. He became the president of the Bartow Chamber of Commerce. He was a director of the Bartow Memorial Hospital. He was a trustee in the Polk Community College. He was a director of the Bartow Public Library, and he was a lay minister in his church. He became the head of the litigation section at Holland Beavis, but then he was called to public service in 1973 by Governor Askew and asked to sit on the Second District Court of Appeal, which, although certainly not a step forward in his bank account, he accepted immediately. Based upon his display of the most important judicial qualities of character, competence, temperament, and diligence, he was chosen in 1987 by Governor Martinez to sit on the Florida Supreme Court for 11 years, being the Chief Justice during 2 of those years. Good judges don't just age, they say. Time just improves them. And Justice Grimes improved to the age of constitutional senility of 70 years of age and was required to retire. He said, though, that he would fail at retirement. And fortunately for us at Holland and Knight, fortunately for us in the state of Florida, he came back to the active practice of appellate law, where he, until a month ago, quietly, unassumingly, professorially, not only represented clients, but looked after people like me and others who were trying to find their way in courtrooms and in our profession. Always available. Justice, did I make an appropriate record? Justice, what do I do? The judge ruled this way. Justice, we didn't do very well with the jury. How do we continue to represent our client? Always there, folks. They say a leader is someone who shows the way. Justice Steve Grimes, together with Faye, have shown us the way, not only in the profession, but in our community as good citizens. Justice, we thank you. Faye, we thank you. We'll miss you, but we know you aren't going far. Hopefully you're close to that telephone, because it won't be long before we'll call you. Thank you, sir. We all, on behalf of the
Indeed, it is kind of isolating up here, where it's just a podium. You're all by yourself. You're so removed from everyone else, so alone. Damn, Justice Kennedy, Justice Polson, now I know how you guys feel. Stephen Zack is a former president of the American Bar Association. He was the first Hispanic president of the Florida Bar. And when he was elected back in 1927, he was the youngest president ever of the Florida Bar. It is my privilege to introduce Stephen Zack, to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Zack.
Seems like a long time ago, 1927. I do remember it well, and those early dinners that we used to have right here. Jack, I got a call while I was sitting there having dinner, and my daughter called me, who you know since the time she was born, and she told me that she's naming her next 2 children Jack Harkness, no matter what sex they are. Judge Scales gave me specific instructions, which I'm most certainly going to honor, that I was limited in my time to 5 minutes. And he said he trusted me, but just in case, there is a trap door right under my feet. And I'll tell you, to introduce David in 5 minutes may have been the hardest and easiest assignment I ever received. It's the easiest because who doesn't know David Boies? Who hasn't read about his triumphs? Who hasn't read his books? Who hasn't watched him in court, particularly in this room? A matter of fact, he's waited 15 years to come back and thank you for the kindness you showed him. Justice Labarga told me he was very excited about David coming, but asked me if he intended to serve any papers on him. I told him that he had nothing to worry about, that the election was far off. His experiences being born dyslexic, conquering dyslexia, as many people have taken from that experience. They've watched David as a hero in so many contexts, and his triumph over not just the dyslexia, but the anger sometimes he sees, the lack of justice sometimes he sees, the fact that people are treated differently. How many of us haven't read, watched, heard, saw when he said, any person in this country should be able to marry any person they love? David has become America's lawyer. For the past 19 years, Time magazine has named him one of the 100 most influential people. There is no greater privilege than to be his partner and to work with him in the many ways that he finds to help people. It's hard to believe that we've been partners for 15 years. And in 15 years, we have not had one disagreement. My wife calls him regularly to find out how that's possible. That's the easy part to talk about. The hard part is really letting you know what makes him the David against Goliath in so many arenas. The New York Times has called him the lawyer everyone wants. And all you have to see him is one time argue to the court to understand why everyone wants him. His sense of fairness and justice can be seen in every representation he has of clients and causes. And some of those clients and causes actually pay pretty well. But whether they can afford it or not makes no difference to David. He takes up the challenge. And where there is a right to be wronged, that's where you'll find him. He's a wonderful father, husband, partner, mentor to so many people. After trying Bush versus Gore, we became partners. I was 53 years old at that time. And you know, when you're 53, you kind of feel you got to figure it out. There's not a whole lot you're going to learn. can tell you that every day since becoming his partner, I have learned something new and wonderful. And it is such a privilege to watch a person who has only one concern, and that's finding justice. He's going to continue to do that we believe that David has no intention of ever retiring. It's going to be his 75th birthday this weekend. He was only in trial 100 days last year. He's not working hard enough, right? But I will assure many of you who I've practiced with since I first started in this profession that the only thing I can wish for each of you is to have the opportunity to someday work with David Boies and experience what it means to be America's lawyer. I'm going to end here and give you a chance to listen to the person you really came to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's the kind of introduction that I always wish my parents were here to hear. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be here tonight. And it's a pleasure in part because when I come back to Florida, and Tallahassee in particular, I feel like I'm coming home. In fact, it was a place that in November and December of 2000, I wish I never had to leave. I was doing all right talking about Florida law to Florida judges. It was when I went to Washington to talk about Florida law that I didn't do so well. So it's always a pleasure to come back here. And it is a privilege because there's nothing more important to me, nothing that has been more important to me other than my family in my life than our justice system. And this is where justice is done. The people in this room, the judges, the leaders of the bar, you are the people that make our justice system work. And it is a privilege to be able to spend a few minutes and talk to you about that system. It is a system that during my life, I have seen reform not only itself, but our society. When I was a young lawyer in the middle 1960s in southern Mississippi doing civil rights work, I thought I was at the tail end of the fight for racial justice. I thought I was at the tail end of the fight for civil rights in this country. That's how naive I was when I was 25. What I have seen is that that struggle is continuing. We've made enormous progress. When I was in high school in California, and in many other states, but in California, it was illegal for people of different races to marry. Still in California when I was in high school. When I was in grade school, people of different races could not go to school together in many of the states in this country, including in Florida. When I was in elementary school, in most states, women did not have equal rights. They had the right to vote, but they often did not have the right to control their own property. And in most states, it was not a crime to rape your wife or to assault your wife, because rape was defined as forcible intercourse with a person not your spouse. What we've seen is that not only in the areas of, as you heard earlier this evening, allowing fair juries, you have seen the courts reform the justice system in terms of making it more equal for people to go to court, whether you are of a different race or a different sexual orientation or different in any other way. You've seen the courts expand the right to privacy, the right to speech, the right to freedom of the press. Landmark decisions from the Florida Supreme Court, from Supreme Court, state Supreme Courts around the country, and from the United States Supreme Court have led the way in making this a more just society and a society more in keeping with a society that our founders articulated but never really practiced. When the Constitution was written, it begins, "We the people of the United States." And the we in "we the people" at that time really meant primarily white, male, Protestant property owners. What you've seen over the last 200 years is the expansion of the circle of who we the people represents. And that expansion has been led by our justice system. Led by our justice system in requiring itself to mete out justice more equally, but also requiring our society to treat people with dignity. And one of the greatest privileges in my professional career has been to participate in some of those battles in terms of the battle for equal rights with respect to people of differing sexual orientations. But that justice system that has served us so well and continues to serve us so well is not something that we can afford to take for granted. Over the same period of time that I have seen that justice system expand civil rights, expand human rights, bring our country closer to the ideals of justice, I've also seen attacks on that justice system, some intentional and some unintentional. Some of those attacks have been in the form of economics. And there is a sense in which we have both too much and too little. One of the things that I have seen during my professional career is the legal profession move from something that knew it was a profession, tried to act like it was a profession, had the ideals of a profession, to a profession that thinks about itself too many times, and more often than not as a profession, but as a business. When I first got out of law school, you'd have all of these Practicing Law Institute seminars about the legal profession. They would talk about the changing areas of law. They would talk about legal ethics. They would talk about access to justice. And you still have seminars about that. But now, even more, you have seminars of how to manage the law office, how to be sure that you're being competitive in terms of your salaries, how to keep other law firms from poaching your people, or how to poach people from other law firms, how you can maximize salaries and maximize income. You have headhunters that go around and try to offer people more money to go someplace else. Now, this is all the market economy, and there's nothing illegal about that. It's probably not even anything immoral about any of that. But what it does is it puts enormous pressure on the legal profession not to do what professions do. Because professions are a way of making a living. But a profession is more than that, because a professional has an obligation not merely to make a living, but an obligation to give back to the profession that they are a part of. And what you find is the pressure on law firms to compete in terms of how much money are they going to pay. How much money are they going to pay new associates? How much money are they going to pay their partners? Where are they going to stand? If you're with a big firm, they're the top 200 firms in terms of size, and they all get ranked in terms of profitability. Everybody looks up and they say, well, how do we stand this year? Who's making more money than we are? There's a certain human nature to that. That probably didn't start 50 years ago. But what I can tell you is that when I started practicing law, the partners in the law firm that I was in made a lot less money than we do now on an inflation-adjusted basis. and they were perfectly happy with how much money they made. And they had great lives. Their kids went to good schools, they drove nice cars, they had a nice house. Maybe they didn't have 5 houses, maybe they didn't have 6 cars, maybe their cars didn't cost $200,000, but they had everything they needed economically, and they had the satisfaction from doing something that they thought was important. Important to their community, important to themselves, important to the kind of society they wanted to live in and that they wanted to bequeath to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And we risk losing some of that. Lawyers are not happier today than they were 50 years ago. I see it. I see it in my partners, I see it in young associates. The quality of life that has been given up is something that each of us in the profession needs to be conscious of. And we need to work together to try to bring back as much of the element of public service and of dedication to the profession and to the cause of justice that we can. People don't go to law school primarily because they think that's the easiest way to make money. They go there primarily because they are interested in the law, they're interested in justice. And then you get out of law school and you often get married, you've got a family, you may have children, you have mortgage payments, you have car payments, you begin to worry about school tuition, and you begin to focus on the economics of what you are doing and not on the profession of which you are a part. And that is a natural tendency, and it is one that can only be dealt with if the leaders of the profession, if the people who have been through it and who are now the managing partners or the senior partners in law firms are willing to try not only to mentor, but to structure the practice of law, structure the law firms in a way that enables young lawyers to partake of what many of us had the privilege of doing in terms of public service and service to the profession. And we need to make that more practical. We need to encourage that. And that is going to be good not only in the pro bono sense of the word, but it's going to be good for all of us, and it's going to be good for them. Because people have a better quality of life. They're happier when they are doing good things. People are happy when they make money, but there is a diminishing rate of return to making money. And when I got out of law school, the average lawyer made about half of what the average doctor made. Today, the average lawyer makes about twice or 3 times what the average doctor makes. And that's not because what we do is more important than saving lives. What we need to do is we need to go back to the extent that we can to an era, and we need to, and those of us who are of the age that I am, or actually those of you who are of an age less than I am, need to really take the lead in empowering the individuals, the young people in our profession to be more professional and to lead the way to making the justice system work more effectively. And I said, to some extent, there was too much and too little. Well, the too little part of it is that ironically, at a time when lawyers are making more money than they've ever made in our life, we are starving the justice system. I asked tonight, because I didn't know exactly with respect to Florida, about what percentage of the state budget is devoted to the justice system. And it's about 0.7, 0.8% of 0.7 or 0.8 of 1%. That is less than 1% of the state budget. Nationally, Ted Olson and I had the privilege of chairing a commission on the justice system for the ABA. And we went around and we held hearings and we investigated the extent of underfunding issues in state courts around the country. And the average amount of spend on the justice system in a state is about 1%. New York is lucky, it's about 1.2%. Think of what a small fraction of state revenues are devoted to a co-equal branch of government, and one that serves all of the people all the time. There are lots of demands on state governments for money. Everybody realizes that. But because of the tiny percentage of state revenues, you can devote a very, very small amount of those revenues adding to the judicial system and make a tremendous amount of difference. Florida is not nearly in as bad shape as many states. There were states around the country in which you couldn't get a court order unless you brought your own paper. There are states, I was in California State Court about 18 months ago, and it was the first time I'd been in California State Court for probably a couple of years. And you walk in, and the first things you see is a big sign posted that says, if you want a court reporter, you must pay for it yourself and you must order it yourself. Now they've since gone back to supplying court reporters for courts of record. But for a 2 or 3 year period, you didn't have a record. You didn't have a record for appeal unless one or the other parties paid for it. There are elements of our justice system that are starving for money. And just as we need, I think, as professionals, to spend a little bit less time deciding how much money we can make and a little more time spending how we can help the profession. One of the things that all of us need to do, if we believe in our justice system, is to try to find ways to get our legislatures, to get our states, to begin to recognize the important funding responsibilities that we have. We have become much more dependent on the law over the last 50, 75, 100 years. And yet the percentage of state revenues that are devoted to the justice system has declined. And that is a function of the fact that we don't have nearly as effective a lobby, an organization as many other special interests. We are, in a sense, a special interest. But our special interest is justice. And it is a special interest that is worth advocating. It is worth going out for. It is worth organizing for. And if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be us. Because if the people in the profession don't do it, nobody else is understanding, and no one else is going to have the incentive or the knowledge or the desire to do that. I think that there could not have been anything that I could have done in my life that I would have enjoyed more than what I've done. It has been an enormous pleasure and privilege to be able to be involved in the kind of cases that I've been involved in, and that I hope to continue to be involved in. If anybody has failed retirement in this room, it is me, as my wife and children will remind me from time to time. But it has been an enormous gift to be able to be associated with people like all of you who have this interest in our justice system, interest in our profession. And it is a hope that I have that we will make this system better. This system has made our country better. This system has made our lives better. This system has made our entire society better. We have to make sure that we don't let that system deteriorate. We need to try to make that system better, both in what we do in our own lives, but also in the support we give to that system in what it needs to continue to be the engine that has driven our country towards the goals of our founders, of equality, of equal opportunity, of fairness, and of justice. Those have been our ideals. Those ideals have been pursued by all branches of government, but first and foremost by the judiciary and by the justice system. If you want to think about how important the justice system is, think how long it would have been before we had tore down segregation if you had left it to the legislature. Think how long it would have been before we had marriage equality if you had left it to the legislatures. The justice, and think how little freedom of press you would have and freedom of speech if you left it exclusively to the legislatures. The justice system is the engine. We are the guardians of that engine. We need to protect it. We need to make it more effective. And we need to devote enough of our time to it so that it really works. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Boies. Kelly O'Keefe wanted me to let you know that on your way out there is a gift for each of you because we very much appreciate your support of the Florida Supreme Court Historical Society. Thank you all to the sponsors. And by the way, each of the gifts out there is named after Jack Harkness. Thank you all very much. Drive safely. God bless you.